Yo, what's going on, gamers? Welcome back to the channel. Now, we are going to be doing, as with everybody, a little Pickems video talking about who I think is going to be making it through, who I think has got the best chance, and all the rest of going 0-3, 3-0, as we do with every major cycle. And similar to the one earlier in the year, this is that kind of new form, quote-unquote, Pickems, where you can't just sort of game the system and have teams that will go through, and then you put the real riskier teams in the 3-0. This one, you actually have to get your 3-0s right. You have to get your 0-3s right to make it through to that next stage. So that's what, of course, we are going to be doing, as with most other talent and all the rest. But as you can see, I've got this lovely little mustache growing. Raising a bit of money for Movember. There's going to be a link down below. It's sort of mental health, men's health, and all the rest. So if you fancy a little donate or just checking it out, myself and a bunch of other commentators have been raising some money. So it's all for a good cause. So go and check it out. That link will be down below. But without further ado, let's get on the way. Let's get in towards the Pickems. This is the fancy new little Pickems thing we've got going here. Of course, the coin itself looks pretty beautiful. I gotta say, this is probably one of the nicest coins I've seen. The Diamond coin as well, that has been kind of put on Twitter. A bunch looks incredible too. So big fan of kind of what we've seen with this. But let's start things as we always do with the 0 and 3s. Now the first one, unfortunately, I think is an absolute slam dunk and a bit of a given here, is Rare Atom. I just don't think this team's that strong. I think they've got a lot of weaknesses. I was surprised they even made it through, if I'm being perfectly honest. I thought Talon would be that other team to make it through, but it wasn't to be for them. So 0-3 for Rare Atom. I'm not going to waste too much time on this one. I just don't think they're a very strong side. I think a lot of people agree on that sense. It's actually the second 0-3 pick that is the big debate here. Where do we go? Who do I think has the best chance of going 0-3 and not picking up a win? Now, there's two in particular that sort of come to mind for me. The first would be Wildcard. Now, I'll explain my reasons behind this, and I kind of mentioned this when I did my RMR video talking, especially on the podcast with the boys as well, of why I sort of thought Wildcard were going to be a weak side. Is Wildcard, I think, for me, have these issues when it comes towards actual stage environments. You know, JBA, I've seen him before in these sort of situations. He's such an incredible player, but I think with little bits of inexperience there, it can be a little dicey for them, and they do struggle at times. But I think with that 3-0 run that they made through the Americas RMR, I think they've got enough up their sleeve to get at least one win. Just, you know, a hiccup win against somebody along the way who maybe also has a chance of going 0-3. Maybe if it was the likes of kind of a Rare Atom, for example, I'd have put Wildcard above them. So my other team that I'm going to put here, and this might come as a shock to some, especially because I do love the team itself and I love the region, is going to be FlyQuest. Now, the reason behind this is primarily off the back of one thing, is that I do think that Alistair is arguably the weakest AWPer in this kind of stage of the competition. It's between him and Kaze, I think, are the kind of the weakest AWPers. And, you know, we saw Alistair have that really good run at ESL Challenger Atlanta, and it was an incredible performance from him. Ended up winning that tournament too, right, which was sick to see. But I do think this team have a lot of downfalls. I think they rely so heavily off the back of Inns. If Inns doesn't play well, they really do fall flat. Inns is such an incredible talent, though, that I think he carries them through a lot of games. I still feel like we need to see a little bit more out of Vexite, for example. With Alistair being considerably a little bit weaker in that situation, it does make things a little tougher for me. So for me, I'm going to put them as my 0-3s. Then we're going to jump on over towards the 3-0. And again, this becomes a little harder to sort of make the predictions of, because you do have to get this right. Which team is going to make this do sort of flawlessly? And the first thing that comes to mind for me is going to be the Mongols. Now, I do actually think the Mongols have so much up their sleeve. Of course, we can make all the arguments about their Valve ranking and their HTV ranking being a little inflated. I think that argument's absolutely fair enough. Now, Thunderpick win was, you know, it was a good win for them as well, but it wasn't against the best of talents. You know, that win of Heroic, fair enough, Heroic's a good team to scalp here, but I do think for me, for the Mongols, it's maybe slightly inflated in a sense, being, you know, 5th in the world, but I still think they are, for me, what I would describe as a top 10 side. So I do think they have the ability to go 3-0 here. So that would be my first team to come through. And then my second team here, I'm actually probably going to try and maybe slightly game the system or gamble, I guess, a little bit in a way of who I think is actually going to make it through in this next stage. Now, for me, I would probably actually want to go for like a Virtus Pro here. Now, Virtus Pro looked very, very shaky. Do not get me wrong. This is a side who had a lot of issues in the RMR, and I think they've had a lot of issues for actually the last 6 months, basically. The teamwork looks all over the place. You've got James all the time talking about how everybody in this team is up for potential change, himself included, and I think probably if this major doesn't go all too well, that there will probably be a change coming for for this VP side, because I think they do have inherent issues in this team. But I'm going to take a bit of a gamble here and just say, sometimes they have these moments where they're very difficult to put away. They have a relatively strong map pool. In best of threes, they're just so grueling to play against. I think some of these quote-unquote lesser sides are going to struggle in this sense. So VP's a bit more of a gamble here, and I'll openly admit that. I don't actually believe they'll go 3-0, but I'm going to just take the gamble and say the teams that I think are more surefire to go through are potentially going to pick up a loss somewhere sort of along the lines. So we'll move on forward. My first team that I think are going to go 3-1 or 3-2. I'm going to back my tier 2 boys. I'm going Passion UA here. I loved what I saw against Astralis. That 2-0 was really impressive. I think the fashion at which they made it was incredible. They're so ramped up. I think Jambo is one of the best kind of up-and-coming prospects in this major that people might not know of or are only starting to get to know of as well. There will also be a video coming out tomorrow, or tomorrow or the next day, where I talk about my kind of top 5 prospects, up-and-coming players, tier 2 players that the general casual viewer might not know of to keep an eye out for at the major. Jambo's in that list. You're going to have to go see where he's in that list. But I break down all the stats and the reason as to why I think Jambo is a real good prospect. But I think on top of that, you got Fear, who I think's calling really well. Zerofix as a rifler, I think, has really stepped up in his own regard. So I like this team. I do really rate what they've been doing. So for me, Passion UA are going to be my first team going through. I'm then going to support another team that I do like a lot, being South African myself. I'm going to go Complexity here. Now, I think Complexity is actually a very good argument to go 3-0, right? And I think they do have enough up their sleeve to be able to do that. I'm just not going to risk it just in case, one shaky loss somewhere on the lines could throw a spanner in the works. So I'm going to maybe try and game the system in the way of maybe expecting a loss somewhere and say that Complexity for me might go kind of 3-1. I think most likely more than anything. So for that reason, I'm going to lock them in there. The second team that I'm going to put alongside them is going to be Pain. Now, again, with Pain, especially in that video tomorrow, I speak about Snow a little bit. I think he has become incredibly versatile as an anchor on CT side, a lurker on T side. I've been liking a lot what I see out from Pain, but I think it all comes down to Biggest Era. Probably, well, I don't think probably, I think he is the best IGL in South America. Currently, I don't think there's a debate there. I think Furia will be chomping at the bit to get a player like him calling that team, and Biggest Era's just been so talented, but he's also putting up the numbers behind it. And then you've got the likes of Lux and Kawes and NQZ. I mean, you're getting all of these different players stepping up in their own regard. For me, I really like what I've been seeing out of Pain. Night Dawn as well. So I'm a huge fan of this side. I have been for a long time. Even in the previous iterations of Pain, I was always a fan. The Skulls and Zevi days, right? Their neck is as well there. And for me, I really like what I see out from Pain. So I actually do believe that they can make it through 3-1 or 3-2. Then I'm going to go alongside them. I'm going to whack in Cloud9 here. Now, this might feel like a little bit of maybe a slightly rogue one, but I actually like what I saw from Cloud9 and the RMRs. There's a side who had a lot to offer up. I think Heavy God's an incredibly versatile rifler. He's very talented. Icy, we've already seen what this guy can do on not only Cloud9, but Amcal before that. He looks really solid. I think all the right pieces are sort of coming together at the right time for Cloud9 as this stage is starting to open up. So I actually do think that they can lock themselves in towards that elimination stage going forward. I think they've got enough talent on the roster here to be able to scalp some of these teams that are kind of quote-unquote lesser than them. So for that reason, I'm going to be putting them in there. To follow them up, though, I'm also going to go with Liquid going in here. I like what I see out of Liquid. A lot of talent on this team. And I know there's been the endless debate about Yakindar saying, is this guy washed? Is he a fraud? Yes, is the answer, to a degree. But I think alongside that, they have a lot more different facets of where they find firepower and why this side is so scary. I think for me, the biggest question about Liquid is what ultimate do we get, right? Do we get the ultimate that can actually, that honeymoon phase ultimate that was like, taking the world by storm? Or do we get the ultimate of Late, who's actually, we have to be honest, by the eye test, actually looked really weak, right? So that is the big thing, but I think, the likes of Naf and Twist, I think they've got more than sort of enough in the locker here to be able to bring just at least something to the table. And then there becomes the big debate of actually who gets his final spot. Now, there's a few different ways I could go about this, and I can make arguments for sort of all of them. I think teams that don't enter this debate, Fnatic, Gamer Legion, Wildcard, and Imperial. I was actually tempted to even go for something like this, right, for a Gamer Legion 03. I mean, even part of me now sort of wants to go with that. I do feel like if I had to go head-to-head, I would maybe make the argument that Gamer Legion are just this side who have looked so weak for me that, I mean, part of me even is debating myself, do I actually lock it in? I don't actually really like what I see yet out of Gamer Legion. I have the utmost trust in Ash. I think he's one of the best coaches around right now. His ability to build teams is incredible. I actually just think it's too early for Gamer Legion, right? That's the big thing for me. This is a side who squeaked through, right? Two good best of three kind of back-to-back wins. They took down Falcons 2-1. They took down Bet Boom 2-1. And they were good games, but they still do look very, very shaky. I like ZTR as a caller. I like Volt as a rifler. I think they've both got a lot to offer up. I think Flamis is an incredible player. He's mentioned in my video tomorrow as well. I think Slen's and Orpo have a lot to give out, but we haven't seen all of it yet. Torsten's maybe one of the big players that I do debate a little bit in this side. That do I think he actually has this ability to kind of play at a tier 1 level? I don't know if I'm convinced. So that's where maybe I would make the debate over Gamer Legion versus FlyQuest, because I look at FlyQuest, I like Dexter as a caller to a degree. I think he can bring a lot in terms of firepower. I think In's firepower-wise is better than everybody on Gamer Legion at the moment. And even on top of that, I think Vexite has these moments to go kind of like head-to-head with a player like a Volt or like a kind of a Torsen in terms of just his raw impact. And that's maybe where the debate comes in. And as much as I love Slen, and I think he's really talented, I just don't think we've seen enough. I think, you know, in the RMR stage, he had like a 1.06 rating, I think it was, which is not bad by any means, but it's still, when you enter in towards the gauntlet of a major, is it going to be enough? This is a guy with, you know, he has a little bit of stage kind of presence and experience. You know, he's been in the side since like March, for example, but as a whole, this team is relatively young, relatively inexperienced. The one thing I will say that goes really positive for Gamer Legion is that I think Flamis is the future. I do think this guy is incredibly talented. He is such a talent and such a good pickup for Gamer Legion that I think, for me, ultimately, he will get picked up by a bigger team at some point. I do think the fact that he is very good kind of English as well as kind of obviously be able to kind of play in Russian is, you know, he's incredibly aggressive. We saw him have this breakout tournament at IM Chengdu with Namiga, right? And I think the big thing for me is I do think that he actually feels like he ramps up a little bit on the stage, and that's where potentially the big debate will come in. So I'll come back to that, but the last team to get locked into my 3-1/3-2 is between, for me, Furia, Big, and MIBR. Now, Furia, I think, looked really shaky in the Americas RMR. They are meant to be a side that are basically a shoe-in every single time to basically be like the #1 team making it through, going 3-0. And the fact that they didn't actually really worried me quite a lot. I think they did just look very shaky. I mean, I can bring it up now. Like, some of the matches that they had at the Americas RMR was incredibly worrying, right? This is a side who are meant to kind of basically be so dominant domestically that there's never any doubts. But looking through some of them now, right, we saw that Liquid loss. That's fair enough, right? It was a 2-1, but it was the Legacy one that really showcased. I mean, I don't think NE0KAI is that good of a caller, and it felt like they just had so many pocket things up their sleeve, which did really kind of worry me quite a little bit, and hence why I would potentially lean a lot more in favor of an MIBR here. Their run was very good, right? This is a side who went flawless throughout the RMRs, but I think also their recent sort of form has looked really good. Their only real kryptonite for MIBR has actually been a team like Pain, for example. We saw them at ESL Challenge League South America, back-to-back series, where Pain beat them. So they beat them 2-1 on a best of 3 and then 3-1 on a best of 5, right? So Pain are just that slight little kind of, I guess, you know, 1 or 2 steps ahead of MIBR right now. But with how good MIBR looked at the Americas RMR, that's sort of where I'd put them. So the big debate for me becomes between FlyQuest or Gamer Legion. Now, I like FlyQuest in certain aspects. I think, yes, I think Alistair's quite a weak AWPer, but as much as I love Slend as a player, I don't think he's fully come into the comfort. When he was on endpoint, he was incredible, so confident, shotgun AWPing, looked so good at what he did. And I think the big thing for me is that for, at least for FlyQuest, they have so much more stage experience than what Gamer Legion do. So I think part of me is actually going to go Gamer Legion here rather than FlyQuest. I think mainly just because I'm a little bit worried about them. Their way in which they qualified to the stage as well was so shaky. That 7th spot, they only just made it. They beat 2 incredibly weak sides as well. Let's be perfectly honest. Falcons are a dead team, and I've been saying for a while that Bet Boom are a dead team. If you look back at when I've kind of done them at ESL Challenger lands, for example, me and Scriff, for example, have spoken about this side, actually, the mental and the camera, you know, when they pan over, they look tilted all the time. The comms look awful. Nafany's obviously not a good caller at the moment. I mean, he's been looking to go international. I don't really know if that's going to work. I think Chiron obviously brings a lot of firepower, but he brings a lot of also negative externalities too, which is kind of the reason behind him getting dropped. So I think for me, this Bet Boom side have been dead for a while. I really have never rated him. I think it says a lot when you go to a Bet Boom Dacha LAN and you're finishing dead last, right? That never sells kind of a good precedent. So I think Game Legion's way in which they qualified, they beat some decent teams to get here, but I think also their last two in particular were ones that kind of really worried me the most. And as much as I love a lot of these players, Vol, you know, I've known him from the UK scene for a while. Lovely guy as well. Slend as well, from MazNXT into Endpoint. Also a fantastic person. Zeti I've had the chance to speak to in the past. I mean, these are great people. Slend as well too. I mean, these are all people that I've had moments kind of to talk to and get to know them. They're lovely guys, but do I think they're ready yet? No, but I have the utmost trust in Ash. You know, Ash knows what he's doing. Like I said, I think he's one of the best coaches and kind of like coach/GMs around right now, but I don't know if I believe in them at the moment. And that's where I probably would put them going 0-3. And also, I think one of the other reasons why I want to go 0-3, if I'm being completely honest here, I've not seen anybody else put them 0-3. A lot of people have been putting the likes of a Wildcard or Flycast. I've seen a couple of Imperials go 0-3. I think I'm going to go Game Legion just to throw a little bit of a span in the works and see if I can take a gamble here. See if I can maybe, you know, bring a little kind of notion to the forefront. I think Game Legion have had these moments where they've looked quite good online. The RMR did worry me a little bit, but they made it through, which is ultimately all that really matters. But this is just me to kind of be a contrarian, be a little different. I always do like to do this in some vein. So that's what I'm going to lock in. There's two big teams that obviously are granted that I think I'm missing here, which is Fury and Big. I like this big team a lot. I would actually maybe make arguments to maybe put a Big through over the likes of a Passion UA or a Cloud9, but I'm letting my bias take over here in every single way, and I'm completely honest when I'm saying that. And the reason I'm not going Furia is just because of how shaky Furia did look. Yeah, they really looked quite woeful at the Americas RMR. I don't know if that's going to sort of change at all, right? This is a side who have been so yo-yo-y in terms of their form that it really does worry me quite a lot. So bias comes through for the Passion UA pick, and I'll even whack them in. Where are they? There we go. We'll do Passion UA as my kind of team graffiti as well, because I do actually love this team a lot. It's such a fairy tale run. It's one of the reasons why I'm actually quite sad the RMRs are going. Having these sort of moments and these, you know, individual stories where you see teams like a Passion UA who, if it was on VRS ranking, Passion UA wouldn't have even been at the RMR. Now they find themselves in the opening stage and potentially with a chance to go into the Elim stage as well. I love that story. The other one that maybe people would argue about and making it through is Fnatic. I do think the worry for me is that Fnatic, even though I think NE0KAI is an upgrade over Afro, I do think they've looked a little shaky. They've looked a little rough. So for that reason alone, I am going to go with them not making it through. Maybe going the likes of like a 2-3 or most likely like a 1-3. I think the 2-3 teams will be teams like a Big or like a Furia. But for the most part, that's where we're going to lock things in. They are going to be my Pickems coming through. I hope you enjoyed, you know, a quick little rundown of kind of why I'm going, where I'm going, and sort of what my reasons are. As you all know, these major Pickems are so random, and one kind of upset result completely throws a bracket out of whack. So we'll see how things pan out. But for me, that's how I'm going to lock things in. Thank you very much for joining us. It's been a pleasure. And until next time, I'll see you soon. Take care.